Chapter the 16th. That was on Monday, but it took us until Friday to put everything together. We each had tasks. I posted a preliminary letter to Tukey. Watson took 3 days to find and secure the best possible vacant cottage for our purposes. Tish and I drew and reviewed floor plans for Dunhenge Hall. Sherlock planned everything on paper, made numerous lists, and procured detailed maps of Surrey and the surrounding areas. Tish and I ventured into the slums of London's East End to search used clothing shops for a suitably appalling dress, plus a complete mourning outfit, my idea, to hide her from curious eyes whilst traveling. And on a day when Tish had to work, Sherlock and I took the train to Belvedere to see Viscount Tewkesbury, Marquess of Basilweather. I protested that I could go by myself, but Sherlock said he needed to witness this transaction if he were to believe it. A nobleman's son and heir, driving a gig at midnight for the sake of one of your mad schemes, Enola? He grumbled, as we walked up the drive to Basilweather Hall. Ludicrous. I retorted. Can you name me any other able-bodied, intelligent young man within our circle of acquaintance who is so blithely unemployed and free to assist us? He replied only with a snort before a youthful voice shouted, Hello! And Tukey appeared, hatless but otherwise impeccable in a shooting jacket and fawn-colored breeches, vaulting over a balustrade to greet us. Hello, Mr. Holmes. Who brought me home? Heartily he shook Sherlock's hand. It is wonderful to see you again. Hello, Enola. Arms flung wide open, he threatened to give me a brotherly bear hug. I stepped back, smiling, but spoke seriously. Tukey, do please settle down and pay attention. It turns out that Black Barouche symbolizes the sort of vehicle body snatchers employ when they carry people off to a lunatic asylum. We need your help. He sobered at once. Anything I can do for either of you? It's both of us, Sherlock interrupted, and you'd better hear about it before you make any promises. Let us take a walk, shall we? Tukey had been raised in a house full of servants who, of course, eavesdropped. He understood at once. He took us for a ramble between the gardens and the woods while Sherlock and I explained the circumstances to him. His response could not have been more satisfactory. All you want me to do is take the train to Dorking, hire a fast horse and a wagonette, meet you near Dunhenge Hall, and assist you as necessary? Of course I will do it. Might I be allowed to punch Lord Cadogan in the nose? Only if I punch him first, said Sherlock, sounding as dry as a gourdsman old as wine. And depending, of course, whether the Duke and Duchess will assent to your taking part in this harebrained enterprise. It's not harebrained at all. It's brilliant, said Tukey, very much to my gratification. And of course my parents will be honored to let me help you, in preparation for my career as a coachman, as driving is the only thing I'm the least bit good at. He meant to make us laugh, and he did. But a few moments later, inside Basilweather Hall, speaking with his parents in our presence, he was quite serious. This is a chance for me to repay, in some small measure, my debt to Miss Holmes. And, of course, it is also a chance to have an adventure, added the Duchess, with a wry look on her distinguished face. Nevertheless, she and the Duke assented to their son's participation in the scheme, I think largely because of the grave authority of Sherlock Holmes. We will all be depending on you, Sherlock admonished, as he handed handwritten instructions and a hand-drawn map to Marquess Tewkesbury, Viscount of Basilweather. I think Tish ate very little during that week of preparation. Indeed, she had eaten little since receiving news of the passing away of her sister, and she had slept badly, so she had grown gaunt and pallid. From Sherlock's point of view, this boded well for her success in passing herself off as the unfortunate Flossie. I, however, worried about her. On the morning of the appointed day, I took it upon myself to invite her to breakfast with me in a private room at my club. An excellent breakfast, including ham, fish, and tongue, along with hot rolls and sweet biscuits. And I exhorted her to eat well, but to no avail. She swallowed only a few mouthfuls. Tish, you must bolster your strength. What will happen to Flossie if you become too weak to play your role? Her smile looked tired. Stop fussing, Enola. You're not my mother. The shock of such a notion, that I could resemble anyone's mother, hushed me for the time being, until we adjourned to my room to prepare for travel. Because we desired to attract no attention, regretfully I made myself as inconspicuous as possible in a tan serge suit and my plainest hat, over hair knotted into a severe bun. As for Tish, her widow's weeds completely concealed her from head to toe, even her face being hidden by the thick black veil fastened to the brim of her stiff black hat. "Heavens, I can barely see where I'm going," she murmured, clinging to my arm as we made our way downstairs and out to our awaiting cab, into which our bags, along with a picnic hamper, had already been loaded. Sherlock and Watson met us at the train station, and for once my brother wore neither his deer stalker nor his top hat. Although not exactly in disguise, he did manage to blend into the populace in his brown trousers, bagged at the knee from wear, a slightly frayed jacket, and an old Homburg. As for Watson, there was no need for him to modify his appearance in any way. He was, and always had been, deceptively undistinguished. Meeting on the platform, seeing to our luggage, boarding the train, and even in the privacy of our compartment, we took care to speak quietly, seldom, and only of commonplaces, such as what a nice warm day it was, summery in September, and as the train progressed out of London, how lovely was the countryside. Tish kept her veil down and barely spoke. The conductor might have thought she was a young widow sunken in grief. Sherlock read the newspapers. Watson and I, seated diagonally across from each other, chit-chatted on occasion for appearance's sake. We traveled to Woking and got off at a station unfamiliar to me, but not, evidently, to Sherlock. Hailing a porter to help with our luggage, he led us to where our transportation awaited us. The drag turned out to be a capacious vehicle, drawn by no less than 4 horses, basically a large vehicle, too plain to be called a carriage, a vehicle with no cloaked and cockaded coachman. A plain country fellow drove us. No shining harness or bearing reins on the decidedly commonplace horses, no filigree and no very plush upholstery either. Once we were rumbling along and the driver could not hear us, I felt free to say, "We are roughing it." "To simulate being a party of small means and no consequence," said Holmes. "Wait until you see the cottage," added Watson with a smile, as mischievous as a boy's. From behind her veil, Tish spoke up suddenly, her tone distressed. "What if, after all this, Caddy isn't home?" Asperity tightened Sherlock's face, but before he could say anything too cutting, Watson spoke. "I am sure Mr. Holmes has his sources of information, Miss Glover." "Quite true," Sherlock affirmed, with a reasonable degree of patience. "Lord Redcliffe remains in residence in Dunhenge Hall, and he has no house guests." Our conveyance bucked and slewed along the rutted country roads. Evidently it lacked any sort of springs or suspension. To talk was to risk involuntarily biting the end of one's tongue off. We were silent. The train trip from London seemed a mere whisk compared to the interminable journey in the drag along unimproved byways, and all 4 horses were evidently quite necessary to drag such a load across such terrain. Several times I reminded myself rather sternly that this method of approaching Dunhenge Hall was necessary in order to keep our arrival secret. Finally, Watson got to his feet, stuck his head out a window, and shouted to the driver, who bellowed back. Then, after several moments of such back and forthing as we found our way between tall hedges lining twisty lanes, we halted in front of our headquarters. The cottage was everything Watson had promised it to be, which is to say, it was not much. Patches of plaster had fallen from the outer walls, bearing the fieldstone beneath. Its low roof made its 2 windows and door for a nose resemble a glowering Neanderthal. The 2-room interior, furnished with nothing but a stove, a table, and a few chairs, looked not much more attractive, but I did not care, for I was hungry. At once I unpacked our cold and rather late luncheon from its hamper. To my surprise and annoyance, no one else except me seemed very interested in the deviled eggs, baked bean sandwiches, crackers, and sardines, etc. Staring out of the cottage's back window, Sherlock waved away my offer of cold Welsh rarebit. "Unless I am much mistaken, one can actually see Dunhenge Hall from here." "Correct. We are situated directly behind its grounds." Coming indoors after having seen to the luggage and dismissed the drag, Watson also gestured refusal when I thrust a sandwich towards him. "Holmes, I have a thought. If we can find or make a way to walk in from here, then we shall not have to deal with the lodgekeeper." "Splendid!" exclaimed my brother, and the pair of them seized sticks and sallied forth, to be seen no more before dark. Sighing, I laid aside the Swiss cheese I was devouring, stood up, and went over to Tish, who remained standing in the middle of the room like a black-draped lamppost. I lifted the heavy veil and peered under it, as if discovering her face in a cave. She looked ghastly pale amid all that black. Come out, wherever you are," I quipped, pulling hat pins so that I could lift away the shroud of black that enveloped her head. After it was gone, she stood blinking, as if the dim light of the cottage dazzled her. I took her by the hand and led her to the table. "Come and sit with me and eat something, Tish." She sat, but she said, "I can't eat." "Truly? Try a few crackers at least." I opened the can of sardines. "I can't. I'll be sick." Munching sardines and crackers, I asked, "Why? What frightens you?" "His caddish lordship?" "Yes, but even more—" She gulped, looked down, looked up at me, and I could see she spoke with great difficulty. "Even more, the prospect of the lunatic asylum itself, being taken there and put away. Tish, Dr. Watson, and my brother will not let you be locked up. You will only lead the way so that we can rescue your sister. Will it not be wonderful to free Flossie?" "If she is all right, but if she has become like the others—" Beginning to comprehend the breadth and depth of her fears, I lost my own appetite, setting sardines and crackers aside. "I must admit, I've given very little thought to the aftermath," I said softly. Where would Flossie go? Where would she stay, if not with her sister? And what if Flossie had become a bit mad in the madhouse? How was Tish to take care of her and make a living at the same time? I took a deep breath. "Tish, let me say 2 things. 1, I will always help you. And 2, sometimes it is best to deal with one problem at a time." Resolutely, I stood up to take her into the other room. "Right now, you and I have a great deal of work to do."